He burned $10 million in cash on purpose. His reason will shock you. He was worth $120 million. And one morning, he walked into a field and burned 10 million of it. His assistant quit on the spot. His business partner stopped returning his calls. And his accountant said he had completely lost his mind. But his 13-year-old son stood right beside him and said 4 words that broke every person there. Stay with us, because by the end of this story, you will never think about money the same way again. The fire was already burning. Not a small fire, not an accident, a controlled, deliberate, enormous fire. And right in the middle of it, stacks of cash, bound with rubber bands, crisp, real American dollars. $100 bills, turning black, curling at the edges, then gone. The man standing next to the fire didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He didn't look away. He just watched. His name was Daniel Cole, and on that cold Tuesday morning in November, he burned exactly $10 million. On purpose. His assistant stood behind him, shaking. His accountant had already threatened to quit. His business partner had stopped returning his calls. And the few people who witnessed it that day, they all said the same thing afterward. We thought he had lost his mind. But Daniel hadn't lost his mind. He had finally found it. And by the end of this story, I promise you, you won't just understand why he did it. You'll wish you had the courage to do the same. Before we go any further, if this is your first time on this channel, welcome. We tell the stories that textbooks leave out, the stories behind the money, behind the power, behind the choices that changed everything. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what we're about to tell you is just the beginning. To understand why Daniel Cole burned $10 million, you have to go back. All the way back to a small apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, 1979. Daniel was 7 years old. His mother, a woman named Patricia, worked 2 jobs, days at a diner, nights cleaning offices downtown. She barely slept. She barely ate. But every single morning without fail, she made Daniel breakfast before school. Scrambled eggs, toast, sometimes just cereal if she was running late. But she was always there. His father was a different story. Robert Cole was not a bad man at heart, but he was a broken one. He chased money the way some men chase ghosts, desperately, constantly, never quite catching it. He made promises, big ones. He told Daniel that one day they'd have a house with a yard, a dog, a car that didn't break down. "One day, son, when I hit it big." Daniel believed him, the way only a child can believe. But one day never came. When Daniel was 9, his father left, not dramatically, no big fight, no goodbye scene. He just stopped coming home. Patricia found a note on the kitchen counter, 3 sentences long. "I'm sorry, I can't do this, don't look for me." Daniel didn't cry when his mother read it to him. He just went to his room, sat on the edge of his bed, and made himself a promise. "I will never, ever be poor, and I will never leave my family." He was 9 years old, and he meant every single word. Daniel Cole was not born with talent they put on magazine covers. He wasn't the smartest kid in school. He wasn't the most popular. He wasn't an athlete or an artist. But he was relentless. By the time he was 16, he had 3 jobs: mowing lawns, bagging groceries, washing dishes on weekends. Every dollar he earned went into a jar under his bed. He labeled it with a piece of masking tape. "Not my dad." It wasn't a savings account. It was a statement. He got into a state university on a partial scholarship and worked the rest of the way through. Business degree. Graduated in the middle of his class. Nothing special on paper. But Daniel had something most of his classmates didn't. He understood hunger, not the motivational poster kind, the real kind, the kind where you choose between bus fare and lunch. He started his first company at 26, a logistics firm out of a spare bedroom. He slept 4 hours a night. He drove the trucks himself when drivers called in sick. By 32, he had 40 employees and a real office. By 38, he had 400 employees and 3 offices. By 45, Daniel Cole was worth $120 million. He had made it. Or so he thought. Here is the thing about chasing a dream your whole life. Sometimes, when you finally catch it, you realize you dropped something along the way. Daniel had a wife, a woman named Claire who had loved him since they were broke and young and full of plans. They had 2 kids, a son named James, a daughter named Lily. But somewhere between the second company and the third office, Daniel had become someone else. He worked 16-hour days, he missed birthdays, he skipped school plays, he took calls at dinner, he checked emails at Christmas. He told himself it was all for them. I'm building something for us, for our future, for the kids. Claire heard those words so many times they stopped meaning anything. One evening, Daniel came home late again to find a plate of cold food on the counter and a note next to it. Just 4 words. James asked about you. He sat down at the kitchen table and read that note for a long time. James was 9 years old. The same age Daniel had been when his father left. Something cracked inside of him that night. But he didn't change. Not yet. Instead, he did what a lot of men do when they don't know how to feel something. He worked harder. And 2 years later, Claire asked for a divorce. She was gentle about it. No anger, no drama, just a quiet, devastating sadness. I don't think you know who you are anymore, Daniel, and I don't think you want to find out. Daniel signed the papers on a Monday morning. Then he walked into his office, closed the door, and didn't move for 3 hours. After the divorce, Daniel threw himself into work the way a drowning man throws himself into water. More deals, more growth, more money. But for the first time in his life, the money wasn't working. It wasn't filling anything. He bought a bigger house, felt nothing. He bought a boat, felt nothing. He traveled to places other people dream about, felt nothing. He started having a drink at night to sleep, then 2, then he stopped counting. His assistant noticed, his board noticed, his doctor noticed. And then one morning, Daniel got a phone call that stopped everything. It was James, his son. James was 11 now, quiet, careful, the kind of kid who thought before he spoke. He said very simply, "Dad, are you okay? You don't seem like yourself anymore." An 11-year-old boy, asking his father if he was okay. Daniel sat in his car in the parking garage of his own building, a building with his name on the door, and he wept. Not politely, not quietly. He wept the way you do when you've been holding something for a very, very long time. He called his doctor that afternoon. His doctor referred him to a therapist. His therapist would later tell a colleague, without naming him, that Daniel Cole was one of the most successful and most lost people he had ever met. Over the next year, Daniel started to rebuild, not his business, himself. He started showing up, to James's soccer games, to Lily's school concerts. He cooked dinner on weekends, he called his mother more. And slowly, something in him began to thaw. And that's when he started asking the question that would lead to the fire. The question was simple. What is this money actually doing? Not in a business sense, in a human sense. Daniel sat down one night with a yellow legal pad and wrote out his life, not his net worth, his life. He wrote down what the money had bought him, the houses, the cars, the deals, the status. Then he wrote down what the money had cost him, his marriage, his children's childhood, his own health. 15 years of his life lived in an office. He stared at both lists for a long time. And then he wrote one more thing at the bottom of the page. The money isn't the problem. What I believed about money is the problem. Daniel had spent his entire life trying to prove something to a father who had already gone. He had turned a 9-year-old boy's wound into a $120 million empire. And somewhere inside all of that building and chasing and proving, he had forgotten that the little boy still existed. Still waiting. Still scared. The $10 million he chose to burn represented the exact amount his therapist had helped him calculate, the earnings from the years he was most absent, the years he had traded presents for profit. He didn't give it away. He burned it. Because he said, and this is important, he said, giving it away would have been a transaction. Burning it was a burial. I needed to bury who I was, not pass it on to someone else. The morning of the burn, Daniel woke up at 5 a.m. He made breakfast for himself, scrambled eggs, toast. The same breakfast his mother had made him as a boy. He drove to a field outside the city that he had purchased specifically for this purpose. His assistant was there, 2 witnesses his lawyers required, and James, now 13, standing quietly beside his father. Daniel had asked James if he wanted to come. He had explained everything, as honestly as you can explain something like this to a child. James had said yes, and then he had said something that Daniel would repeat for the rest of his life. Dad, I don't need the money, I just needed you. They lit the fire together. It took 4 hours to burn completely. Daniel stood there the entire time. He didn't look away once. When it was over, he put his arm around his son, and they walked back to the car. Nobody said anything for a long time. Finally, James looked up and said, "What do we do now, Dad?" And Daniel Cole, $110 million man, smiled for the first time in years. "Whatever you want, son, whatever you want." Now, here is the part of this story that nobody talks about. 6 months after the burn, Daniel's company experienced its best quarter in history. Not because he worked harder, because he finally worked differently, calmer, clearer, present. He restructured his board. He promoted from within. He delegated to people he finally trusted. He started a foundation, not for publicity. He never announced it publicly. He set it up quietly to fund children in foster care, kids growing up without fathers to go to college. Claire. They didn't get back together. That's not this kind of story. But they became something harder and more rare than romance. They became a real family, separate homes, shared dinners, united parents. And on James's 14th birthday, Daniel showed up, on time, with no phone in his pocket. Just a card. Inside it he had written, "I spent 15 years building a fortune, then I burned the part of it that cost the most, and what I found underneath was worth more than anything I ever built. You, this, us." Daniel Cole burned $10 million. And in return, he got back his son, his peace, and the man he always meant to be. The money was never the story, it was just the smoke. The real fire had always been inside him. If this story moved you, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it, someone who is working so hard they've forgotten what they're working for. Subscribe if you haven't already. We tell stories like this every week, real, human, true. And remember, the most important things you will ever have, don't burn.